Today we're going to talk about Azure Databricks, and what Databricks is Spark processing in the cloud. So a lot of you may already know what Spark is and doesn't need any introduction, but for those of you that don't, here we go. So in order to understand Spark, let's take a quick step back and look at Hadoop. Hadoop was introduced years ago to deal with the problem of big data. It used to be we'd have one server, one computer that would deal with all your data processing, and as your data grew, that computer would get bigger and bigger and bigger. But really the data grew bigger than the computer too quickly. So what they introduced was Hadoop and Hadoop file system, which is a great way to be able to take a very large file and spread it across many, many different computers. It can be gigabytes or even petabytes. And then on top of that, they ran programs like MapReduce, which they still do today. And that is great, it's a great solution, but for some things, it's not the best solution. Like it really runs at disk speed. So a really smart gentleman from UC Berkeley named Matai Zaharia. Matai, I apologize if I mispronounced your name. He came up with Spark, which was is just an easier way, a faster way to deal with big data. And it's essentially a unified analytics engine that allows you to do many different things, not just transforming your data, but also machine learning, stream processing. And so Matai donated the Spark project to the Apache Foundation, and then he started his own company with the help of some others called Databricks. So of course you can run Spark or Hadoop on your own infrastructure, but that turns into a lot of maintenance, a lot of overhead, takes a lot of people to manage that, manage all those compute platforms, data center, etc. So with Azure Databricks, what you can do, it's just-in-time Spark. You can spin up clusters, large amounts of clusters with the CPU, RAM, memory that you need, and then do your processing. And when you're done, you shut those down, or they auto shut down. You don't pay for the compute clusters when you're not using them. It's a very flexible environment. Like I mentioned before, you can do SQL, you can do stream analytics, you can do extract, transform, and load when you're transforming your data. You can do machine learning, data science on Azure Databricks in a very familiar notebook, like a Jupyter notebook environment. You can write these notebooks in, I think I already mentioned SQL, you can do Python, R, Scala, Java. So very flexible, very easy to get going quickly with big data processing using Spark, using Azure Databricks. So let's take a look at what that looks like in Azure, and I'll help you understand the different components. Okay, so if you don't already have an Azure subscription, you can go to azure.microsoft.com and create one, get 12 months of free service. I already have one, so I'm going to portal.azure.com. And then here I have my dashboard. I'm going to click this plus or create a resource button. And then under category, just pick analytics. Then we're going to be presented with some different options. If you didn't see what you were looking for here, you could just say see all, but we see Azure Databricks. Let's go ahead and click that one. Now just a few things we need to enter to get going. I'll just call it Kirby's Databricks. I'm just going to use my default subscription. This is the resource group. I can use an existing one. It'll give me a drop down of all the different resource groups I have. So I'm going to pick Databricks here, or you can create a new one. Once again, a resource group is just like a logical grouping of what you create in Azure. Pick a location. I tend to pick West US2. I'm in Los Angeles, but that's a pretty good option for me. Otherwise, you know, pick a different region. Now under the pricing tier, you're going to have three options. You can just use your trial one here, which is absolutely free for 14 days. Or you can do standard or premium. Obviously, if you're going into maybe a production situation and you want the role-based access controls, you can pick that one. But I'm just going to click the trial premium. And for right now, we don't need to use a VNet, so you can just click the create button. And it'll just validate that everything's okay. And if so, it'll start creating that Databricks workspace. Keep an eye on this little bell here. This is your friend. It's notification. It tells you when your deployment is finished running. So let's just keep an eye on that. And when that's
complete, you'll see an option to go straight to that resource. Okay, a minute or two went by, and you'll see in my notifications here that our new Databricks cluster workspace is created. So click the Go to Resource. What I like to do here before I do that is say Pin to Dashboard. That way it's easier to find it later. See, it just put it right here. So a nice little tile on my dashboard, easy to get to in the future. Click Go to Resource. You're presented with this page here. Down here, these boxes here are documentation, links to documentation that help you get started. But let's go ahead and dive directly into our workspace. We do that by clicking the Launch Workspace button. Makes sense. So it is using Azure Active Directory to sign me into my workspace. So here's my workspace. It's going to present you with some common tasks that you can do here. But let's pay attention to the top, to the left column over here. And this is where this is the menu that you'll use most of the time. The very first thing you might do is create a cluster. And that's done by clicking this cluster button right here. You can see I've got no cluster set up, so we're going to create one. It's going to present you with a few options. And first of all, of course, it's going to ask you for the name. And we'll call it cluster. Let's be alliterative. Standard versus high concurrency. Let's just pick this standard one for right now because we're just doing some testing. You click this runtime version here and you can pick whichever version you want. There's machine learning versions that have TensorFlow, things like Keras built in automatically. Pick your Python version. We're going to stick with 3. And then we'll go ahead and do the auto scaling feature, which means it's going to you set a min and a max worker count for your processing. It won't use 8 right out of the chute, only if you need that. So this is a nice way to control costs as you do your processing. Also, this is another very good cost-saving feature is the auto terminate. So we're going to say, hey, terminate if nothing is happening on this cluster over a 60-minute period, go ahead and shut it down. So that way you can save money too. Then you have your worker type options and your driver type. A cluster always has one driver type, and that maintains the context of your notebooks. It interprets the commands you're running, and then the worker types actually carry out that work. You can pick a different type depending on how much CPU and memory you need. And by the way, these all correspond to regular Azure VM types. Keep that in mind. And this is where you can auto scale, obviously by setting the min and the max workers. And also you do have some advanced options down here to initialize the cluster. You can add certain paths of things that you want to run or be configured, including environment variables, every time this cluster is run. So now we're done with those options and we just click Create Cluster. Okay, here we are on our clusters page and we see that the state has changed from pending to running. So I can now click in on this cluster that we just created and we can see the same configuration options we used. By the way, if you're used to like the typical Spark cluster user interface, you can get to that by clicking that. But yeah, this is your cluster that we've just set up. We can terminate it. That does not mean delete it, of course. That's delete here. So terminate is really just stop, restart, or clone, make copies of. So once again, on clusters, just a review, you can set up as many clusters as you want. You only pay for these as you actually are using them, and the only time you pay for them, let me put it that way, is when they're running. And I showed you the auto terminate feature, so you can stop them when they're not being used to save money. Okay, let's get into the coding portion, and that is done via notebooks in a workspace. Click the workspace menu item, go to users. This is where you're going to set up your own personal library, and click your user ID. Then you're going to want to click this here, and first of all, we're going to create a folder to put, let's just say, ML notebooks, machine learning notebooks. Create the folder. Now you'll see this here. And then you can create a notebook from scratch, but let's go ahead and import one into this ML notebook. Import, and we're going to browse. And I'm looking for a .dbc, Databricks Cloud, I think it stands for. We'll click that one there, say open, and it gives you a green check mark if everything looks good, and then you go ahead and import it. Okay, so let's go in and see what happened. This is the folder. It created a folder within a folder. Now I have a choice of Python or Scala. Let's go ahead and pick this, and this is just going to give you some an overview of what machine learning is, just for an example here. But let's open it up and see what it looks like. Here is a notebook. The primary language that the notebook is written in is going to be in parentheses here, like Python. Okay, since the primary notebook language is Python, if you scroll down here to one of these cells that has some Python code in it, here we go. It's creating a data frame. There is no magic command. Like I said, no parentheses, because that's the default language. Now, in this situation, let's go ahead and insert at a cell above. And then I'm going to just paste in a little bit of code with the %, that magic command I talked about, and MD for markdown language. Now let's go ahead and run this cell. You do that by just hitting Control Enter, and then that converts that to a formula. So very flexible notebooks. Like I said, you can have graphics in here, regular text, markdown language, and then of course the Scala, Python, R, etc. Go over a few navigation items. Scroll up to the top. We're looking here, and if you want to look for keyboard shortcuts, click the little keyboard here, and remember how I told you that running a command is Control Enter. Well, you can find that right here. Run command, Control Enter. Run all commands, above, below, etc. So that's very helpful right there. Also, revision history. Click this, and you're going to see different updates that have been made. You can click on one of these earlier ones and revert to it. So you'll notice that as you add these cells, you're not really saving anything. As soon as you put that code in these cells, it's automatically saved, but you can easily revert back to a different revision. So pretty slick feature there. Okay, last quick feature I want to show you is scheduling a job. Click the Jobs menu on the left. You're going to create a new job. Give it a title. And then just select a notebook. You don't have to do any code from scratch. We'll go ahead and navigate over here to where our machine learning notebook is, just as an example. Click OK. And then go ahead and you can either run it now or set up a schedule, which we'd probably want to do. So the schedule says none. We'll go ahead and edit that. And we can say every day at a certain time of the day. So yeah, that's how to set up a job and kind of a quick overview of Databricks. And don't forget the Databricks documentation. Just go to docs.databricks.com. Has a lot of good, helpful features out there. So yeah, thanks for watching.